Hey Bays, it's Bailey and welcome back to another speed build. Woohoo! This build is obviously a micro home and it's what I'm calling the Yugo micro home. Yugo being, I believe, Japanese for fusion. If it's not, please tell me and I'll change the name. Anyway, the idea I had in my head was this fusion of French and Japanese aesthetics. I've done a couple of other builds like this before, but I haven't recorded them because this was before I had my channel and before I had the capability of recording my builds. So I wanted to start again with this idea. And I'm considering doing a whole series of fusion builds. I don't know that they'd all be French-Japanese, but that's just where I wanted to start because I like it. But I want to do a bunch of different kinds of builds with this, aesthetic fusion. And I want to do them in a bunch of different styles. So, like, I'm starting here with the micro home, and this is a starter home. It is a micro home, and it is fully functional. So you can go ahead and download it if you have a single sim with a computer-based hobby who doesn't need a whole lot of living space. Yeah, that's your choice. And I did build this in Mount Komorebi in the Wakaba neighborhood. So, if you're lucky, Yamachan will just randomly walk into your house and drink water and try and bake cake. I really hate that bug. Does anybody else get that? Where Yamachan, if you live in Wakaba, Yamachan just walks into your house randomly and does things? I hate it so much. I hate when random people just walk into my house. It's just like, it makes me think of my real world anxiety of like, if somebody in the real world just randomly walked into my house and started messing around with my stuff, I would just probably implode from rage and anxiety. But I don't know, maybe that's just me. I am very much an introvert and I like my space and I don't like people up in my space uninvited. But anyway, let's get back to the build. So I played around with this a little bit. I keep to pretty much this layout the entire time, but when I went into playtest, I realized that where I had the desk, it wasn't functional and I couldn't figure out why. It's possibly had to do with some of the clutter I had, but I wasn't sure if it was because it was between two walls like that. So I ended up moving it later on. I'm not sure if I did it while I was recording. I did do some like decorative item, like a bit of decorating off camera, just because I was still. This was actually the first build where I used debug items. So I spent a long time running through menus and trying to just figure out how to navigate that. I also have a tendency to forget to put lights in places. So I realized after a while that I'd been building in the dark for quite a while. So it's like, okay, yeah, maybe let's put in some of these lights, even if we just have the temporary super subtle saucers in there, just so that I can see what I'm doing. But as you've probably seen in my other build videos, lighting is always a problem for me. I never know what to do with it, and I'm not sure I quite mastered how to do it well. So one of the things I really loved this wallpaper from Paranormal Stuff. I think it gave me hardcore French vibes, and excuse me. And in the white, it really kept with this very, what words do I use to describe it? There's a degree of like Japanese modern minimalism, but also that what I picture as French, I don't necessarily want to say high class or like bouginess, but do you know what I mean? It's the way the florals go. It's the florals and the curves in the white, especially. It makes me think French. I don't know. Maybe I'm just culturally uninformed. I did not do pretty much any research into making this build culturally accurate. If you would like to do a culturally accurate French-Japanese fusion build, I think that would be awesome, and I would love to see it. So if you do that, please send it to me. So another thing I struggle with a lot in building is roofing. I am probably one of the few people who misses the auto roof tool from The Sims 3 because I hate building roofs. But for this one, I luckily was trying to fit with the Japanese aesthetic of the rest of the world around this build. So I was able to look at the other roofs in the area and see how they looked in comparison. I still struggled a lot, and then after a while realized that I had done something overly complicated, which could have been made very simple. And I do that a lot in my builds, especially with exterior stuff. I'm much more an interior decorator than an architect when it comes to building. So if you ever want to see me do renovations of things, like if you want to, or just furnishing, if you love building shells and exteriors and landscaping and all that, but you hate furnishing, please send your builds my way. I would love to furnish your builds. That sounds like fun to me. Give me a day when I don't have to build a shell. It sounds great. Because what I usually do with shells, and probably why I like building tiny homes so much, is I usually build rooms first, and then I furnish the rooms, make sure those rooms have everything I need in them, and then I like to put them together like a puzzle. I don't think I've done that in any of the builds I've done on this channel yet, but that is usually how I like to play, especially if I'm building like family homes. I find floor plans so confusing, and shells so confusing. Like I don't know. It just it's something about the way my brain works doesn't like doing that, and it prefers to make puzzles. But that's probably why I like tiny homes, because I like to, I like the challenge of putting everything in a small space, and I like building in just this singular room space, and then sometimes subdividing therein. Oh, another thing I had fun with this was using the little cedar bars from Snowy Escape as trellises for the ivy. I know that's not what they're meant to be used for, but I thought that came out pretty cool. So if you're ever looking for a trellis, there you go. So here's where I get into some of the landscaping, and I always struggle with landscaping. I still do, but this time I had a little bit more fun with it. This was I had built this just before Cottage Living came out. So I knew the pond tool was coming, so I was making room there for a pond, and I wanted to echo that little, I'm not sure what that is because that's not a stream. Is it a path? I don't know. The thing next door with all the trees in it. So here I am just kind of getting that space ready for there to be water in it. And like I'm sure many other people, I struggled a lot with plants floating. I'm still getting used to that. This was before I did my book mill build, so I didn't have a ton of practice with that. But yeah, I spent a lot of time going through the debug menu just looking for things. I was very impressed with all the things I found in there. There was a lot of cool stuff. So landscaping is so expensive, especially base game landscaping, especially rocks. Oh my god, rocks. Don't even get me started on fucking rocks. But also these lavender plants are really expensive too. And lavender is one of those things I think of when I think of France. So I had to include lavender in there. But yeah, so this is just a very long time of me going through plants and just trying to build around this, precursor to a pond. I also thought about doing some debug items crawling up the side of the build, but I don't think I actually did, because I think I noticed that when I try and put the walls down, the debug plants that crawl up a wall will not go down with walls. And especially in a tiny build where there's such limited real estate and you get a lot of things blocking your view, I thought that would be really annoying for gameplay. Obviously, if you just build and you don't really do a lot with gameplay, that's not as much of a concern. But I am a gameplay player first. I play the game mostly for live mode, and I've only just recently gotten into building. And I did cast too, but I don't do a lot of detail with facial features. I mostly just do styling, because I am an amateur stylist, as I am an amateur interior designer, as I am an amateur god. Yeah, that's how The Sims works, right? I'm also really uncomfortable with terrain paint. I don't know how to make it look natural, so I just kind of experimented with playing with some shading and some different colors. I don't like how the brushes work. I don't know, or I'm just not fully comfortable with them yet, and this was a very early build for me. Well, okay, it wasn't very early, it was early in my YouTube career. And okay, so here's where I went back in after Cottage Living released and put in the pond. And we didn't really have to make a whole lot of tweaks to it, so there we go. There's our build. It's already on the gallery for you to download, so go ahead and check out that link in the description. Otherwise, like if you did, subscribe if you want to, but most importantly, take care of yourselves, bays. Love you. Mwah.